time we talked about a serious problem in modern Monster Hunter. The problem? A lack of Nergigante. There's so many monsters in so little time. So much space in this game. It's honestly a big crime. Looking at all of these environments and all these cool places, we have a serious lack of seriously cool faces. For Wilds, bring back the old monsters who've been exiled, the ones who'd kill you as they'd flaunt their gorgeousness. Like a bundle of spikes, an angry danger hedgehog from above, he strikes, whether guarding magma turtles or fighting the huntsman. Dive bombs are guaranteed when he's in your huntsman. Without further ado, and with plenty of time to savor it, let's talk about a monster who's surely a fan favorite. Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, Wilds is coming up and out next year, and I know I say this a lot, but it's important to reiterate it for the people who haven't seen other recent videos from me. Yes, I am still near completely spoiler-free for Monster Hunter Wilds. Even the footage in the intro song and this part here that you're seeing right now is from a trailer that I have not seen with my own eyes. I will remain as blind as possible going into the release of the game to preserve my reactions, and I've only really seen the literal first reveal trailer that showed stuff like the new Mount Monster and that Rathalos exists. That said, one of the few things that I can do in this sort of state where I'm at is talk about monsters I'd love to see return in this upcoming game and how I would like to see that done. However, given just how much content has been released about the game at this point, how much news, gameplay done by people, all of which I have avoided purposefully, I can't really use any reasoning to logically prove that a monster would show up or even reason it in the first place. It's only an estimation of something that I really would like to see and think could be improved on in fun ways. Today then, our main feature is Nergigante. I love this monster. It's one of my favorites from the 5th generation as a whole, and possibly even just one of my favorite monsters in general, like at least top 20. And the first question that you may be asking is, really? A monster from World coming back already? And honestly, I think that is a worthy part of this discussion as a whole. Specifically the question of if it's worth fighting for the return of a monster that has only missed one game and an expansion over a monster who hasn't been around in multiple generations, perhaps. Bros. There is no direct objective answer to that, but my opinion is relatively simple with this. If there is an interesting way to work a monster in, to improve them and update them and make them simply function better, I would love to see them again. For example, we got a lot of world and iceborne monsters in Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak, the very next game and its expansion, of course. Theoretically, part of this would just be because it was easy enough for them to bring it over from the previous game, but I think, well, not all of them really did too much to shake up the game by being in there. Things like Kulu and Pookie were nice to have around, but didn't really feel crazy different from their world or iceborne versions. But then you have things like Anjanath, which most people would agree is a wildly different feeling of a fight in Rise and Sunbreak than it is in Monster Hunter World, partially just because of the different pace of the gameplay in Rise and Sunbreak in general. It has a larger effect on its fight than most of the other ones because it is a bit of a higher tier monster, partially because it feels like he was just beefed up a bit in this game, and partially because his moveset actually works well at catching people out who are a bit more vertical, and the wirebug skill specifically involve more verticality than most people would have had access to in World. The point being, it can be done if it is done right. It actually affects the way the fight feels. I would rather have a new monster than a returning monster 9 times out of 10 personally, and I'd rather a returning monster be from older generations than fresher generations 9 times out of 10 as well, but there are slight exceptions to this rule, and Nergigante is a big one in my mind. The main reason for me is actually the difference between base standard Nergigante and Runer Nergigante, his variant. I've long held the opinion that Nergigante is simply a better monster than his variant is that was introduced in Iceborne. And a unique quirk about Iceborne was that most of the monsters who got variants in this expansion no longer had their base version appear in Master Rank. There is simply no Master Rank regular Devil Joe, no Master Rank regular Basil Geese, no Master Rank regular Nergigante. They all simply turned into their variant version for Master Rank without retaining the original for the expansion. And for a lot of people, they actually spent far more time with the Iceborne expansion itself than the base game of Monster Hunter World, as the end game of Iceborne was much more fleshed out and more properly, existent once you completed the story. And that means that for the majority of many people's playtime in the 5th generation, in Iceborne or World, their game just didn't have base Nergigante, because they were probably playing Iceborne more than they did World. They had Runer, and Runer is just very different. Aesthetically, the metal spikes is a cool concept in itself, but it makes it feel far more artificial to me. It's cool as sort of a bonus version of a monster, but when it was was the only version of Nergigante in Master Rank, it made it feel just less like an actual monster that would develop naturally in the wild. And while Bleed with these metal spikes is a pretty fun pairing, there is something just unbelievably satisfying to me about the fight with base Nergigante that Runer just didn't quite hit for me. It felt like they were trying to go for difficulty above trying to fit what made the original Nergigante fight really good to me. I've always said that I believe Nergigante to be quite possibly the most learnable fight in maybe even the entire series. Not only because of how his moveset works as a whole, it's mostly made up of higher damage, larger hitting attacks that are slower to actually launch off, because everyone has a position that you can easily move to and stand in to avoid it, or enough of a telegraph that it's easy enough to dodge positionally. And importantly, his whole main mechanic is if you break a patch of his spikes off once they start growing on him before they change color, you get a free full knockdown on him for a few seconds afterwards, and he won't even start growing spikes from body parts until you start to hit them. So it's really all about managing what you do and how you fight the monster. The first time that you fight him, obviously none of this stuff is apparent. It feels like he's a demon that has been thrust upon you. You don't understand how his spikes work at all, so they all will appear all over his body, they will turn black and start bouncing your weapon off of it, and then he'll just dive bomb you every time this happens, which at a glance just feels like a super unfair attack until you learn how to deal with it. Because not only is it relatively easy to actually dodge if you know the telegraph, but you never even have to reach the dive bomb part of the fight to begin with if you play it right. Keep your hits to minimal amounts of body parts, and if you do hit the body parts, make sure to break the spike before they turn black. It's super learnable, and what learnability it has is super satisfying. That said, in the environment of a new setting, like a new game like Wilds, if this monster was brought back, I can only hope that Nergigante would be given new moves that still fit into the same sort of archetype, keeping his learnability as a main function, but expanding the just sort of amount of things that you need to be able to learn. Because in my mind, he's like the perfect tutorial Elder Dragon, the perfect introduction in a generation to the concept of Elder Dragons that will precede him. The one that has the power of an Elder Dragon just like the others, but not in an overwhelming way. He doesn't have power in an elemental way that is flashy and crazy and hard to track. He is a big physical powerhouse that is very, very clear whenever things happen to him, as long as you fought him at least a couple of times. So why not just expand on him the way he is, make him fit more into the concepts of the game and whatever new mechanics we have. Again, it's hard for me to get more specific here because, well, I don't know what the new mechanics are in Wilds, but from what little I do know, maybe he could have special interactions with the new mount monster. Maybe he punishes you if you are riding the mount monster and can knock you off of it if he catches you on it for too long, or if you get too close while riding. Maybe like if you use items while you're on it, he could even turn it into like a pin attack that really drives it home. If you use an item while on the mount, he just grabs you right off of it, and you can even have that lean into the whole learnability thing by having this have a very clear telegraph when he's about to do it, and then maybe you can even bait it out as a result of it, then get off of your mount quickly after it starts, and if you time it right, maybe it'll give him a few moments where he's recovering from this animation and you can beat on him a bit for free. Maybe use the new technology of the game in interesting ways, like updating the spike projectiles that he shoots out to have more functionality and more sort of permanence. Maybe you could even have his spikes, when shot out of him, stay as a physical object wherever they hit, wherever they land. If they get lodged in the ground or in a wall, like the Nergigante tracks that you can actually find while you search for him originally in World, so there is precedence for this, so maybe they could just count this as an actual physical object that sticks around. Literally a pile of spikes in the ground blocking your movement if you walk into them like a wall, so you have to consider the space of the fight around you, even if it isn't visible on your camera. You have to manage where the spikes are, where you fight within each zone, and then take it even further. Maybe he can break them with his own attacks to get rid of them, so you can actively push him to clear the arena for you, and if they happen to be black spikes that he shot out, he would maybe even bounce off of his own spikes because they would be that hard. Again, creating more openings for the hunter. I just think this fight has a ton of potential to play off of the idea of mind games like that, and just a sort of show of knowledge. Not necessarily a challenge of reflexes or a challenge of your pure damage output in your build, but just a literal knowledge check. A fight to make you stop just Zerg, Rush, Berserker raging like people do before they reach Elder Dragons, and flinging your weapon at a monster until it dies. Instead, stopping, taking a step back, analyzing the situation in front of you and how to make it the best advantage for yourself, and how to actually win. My other biggest reason to want him back is somewhat tied to something that I said earlier, which is that regular Nergigante was never in Master Rank in Iceborne, so we never got to see what would theoretically be his complete moveset, as most monster movesets are viewed as incomplete until we see their G rank or master rank versions. And while you could argue that Runer Nergigante is essentially the master rank moveset for the regular Nergigante fight, they're quite clearly different monsters. They're categorized as different monsters, and a lot of the attacks that Runer has wouldn't really quite make sense for regular Nergigante to do. And to me, that means that there is a lot of room left to expand on base Nergigante specifically without following the same direction as Runer did, especially if they add him to the base game of something like Wilds, and then he would stick around for the inevitable expansion in a couple of years' time from now to get a proper master rank version. To sum it all up then, really, I love Nergigante as a monster. I think he is one of the objectively best designs in like all of Monster Hunter. Like, all bias aside, I think both aesthetically and combat-wise, the way his fight works, he's just an incredibly high quality creature that was made for the series. I think we have a fair bit of precedent for this for recent monsters still returning. I mean, we even had Velkhana return in Sunbreak, which was from the expansion of one game to the expansion of the next. It is an incredibly small amount of time, and it was an Elder Dragon flagship, so that's about as equivalent as you could possibly ask for to prove that they're at least willing to bring monsters back of this tier and with this speed. Not to mention, just based on track record, it seems our general goals are to keep as many of the flagship monsters as up to date as possible, as the only flagship monster that did not return in the 5th generation was Legiacris, who it was very well known that they wanted to include in Monster Hunter World but just couldn't get it to work, and of course also Gammoth, who I personally have a separate theory will definitely actually be in Wilds herself, as I think it's been long enough that they've just been cooking on that design, waiting for the right opportunity to show us a significantly upgraded fight, but she is a topic for another day if you want me to talk about that too. Point being, the flagships have more meaning than just a name. They represent a game, a generation, and the developers attribute a lot of importance to these monsters and to showing them the proper respect as a result. So I think it is both a believable thing that this could happen in Wilds, and as I've explained, something that I would love to see iterated on and reworked to see if they could make it even better than what I already think is one of the best monsters that's ever existed. That just about does it for today then, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed this discussion about Nergigante and his potential return. Unfortunately, I won't be able to read the comments for this for fear of any spoilers, so feel free to say whatever you want. And if you have any suggestions for other monsters you think would be fun to see in Wilds and worth doing in a series like this, put them in the comments and Joshua will relay anything to me that he thinks is worth considering. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.